The gunshot echoed through the narrow canyon, and Sarah Emerson knew her life was about to change forever. She pressed herself against the rough wooden wall of the general store in Hawthorne, Montana territory, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. The year was 1878, and she had been in this mining town for exactly 3 months, working as a seamstress to support herself after her father's death in a cave collapse. Now Cyrus Porter, one of the miners who frequented her shop, stood in the dusty street outside, a pistol in his hand and madness in his eyes. "Sarah, you come on out here," Cyrus yelled, his voice slurred with whiskey and rage. "I paid good money for those shirts you mended. That means you owe me more than just needlework, woman." Sarah's stomach turned. She had heard of men like this, men who thought any kindness or business transaction meant a woman was indebted to them in ways that made her skin crawl. She had been careful, so careful to keep her interactions professional, to never give him any reason to think she welcomed his advances. But apparently, that had not mattered to Cyrus Porter. "I do not owe you anything beyond the work I completed," Sarah called back, trying to keep her voice steady even though her hands were shaking. "You paid for mending and I mended your clothes. Our business is concluded. The hell it is." Another shot rang out, and Sarah heard the bullet splinter wood somewhere above her head. "You smiled at me. You took my money with a smile. That means something." The street had gone quiet. Sarah could feel eyes watching from behind curtains and cracked doors, but no one stepped forward to help. That was the way of things in these rough mining towns. People looked after themselves, and a single woman with no family was on her own. "Please just go home, Cyrus," Sarah tried again. "You have been drinking. You will regret this in the morning." "Only thing I will regret is letting you tease me for 3 months without getting what I deserve." Sarah looked around desperately. The back door to the general store was locked from the outside. The only way out was through the front, and Cyrus stood between her and any hope of escape. She thought about running, but where would she go? Her small room above the seamstress shop offered no protection. The marshal was 50 miles away in the next town, and the local mining boss did not concern himself with disputes involving women. She was calculating her options when she heard the sound of horse hooves, slow and steady, coming up the main street. The rhythm was different from the usual frantic pace of miners rushing to or from the claims. This was measured, deliberate, the sound of someone who did not hurry for any man. "You might want to put that gun away," a deep voice said, and Sarah felt something shift in the air. The voice was calm but carried an edge that made the hair on the back of her neck stand up, not from fear, but from something else entirely. "This is not your business, stranger," Cyrus snarled. "Keep riding. I am making it my business." Sarah carefully peered around the corner of the building and felt her breath catch. The man sitting on the large roan horse was unlike anyone she had ever seen. He was massive, with shoulders that seemed nearly as broad as the horse itself, and arms thick with muscle that showed clearly beneath his rolled-up sleeves. His hair was dark and fell past his shoulders, and a thick beard covered the lower half of his face. He wore buckskin pants and a simple cotton shirt that had seen better days, and across his lap rested a rifle that looked well used and carefully maintained. But it was his eyes that captured her attention. Even from this distance, she could see they were a striking shade of blue-gray, like storm clouds over the mountains, and they were fixed on Cyrus with an intensity that would have made a smarter man back down immediately. "I said this is not your concern," Cyrus repeated, but Sarah heard the uncertainty creeping into his voice. "The woman owes me." "The woman owes you nothing," the stranger said, swinging down from his horse with an easy grace that seemed impossible for someone so large. Now that he was standing, Sarah could see he was easily over 6 feet tall, maybe closer to 6.5, and built like he had spent his entire life wrestling bears and moving boulders. You paid for services. She provided services. That is the end of it. Who the hell are you to tell me what is what? Name is Vincent Rourke, the man said, taking a step forward. I trap in the mountains north of here, came down for supplies, and I do not take kindly to men who threaten women. I was not threatening. I was just— You fired 2 shots in her direction, Vincent interrupted, his voice dropping even lower. That is threatening where I come from. Now you have 2 choices. You can put that gun down and walk away, or I can take it from you. But I should tell you, the second option will not be pleasant for you. Cyrus looked from Vincent to the gun in his own hand, clearly trying to work through the whiskey fog to make a decision. Sarah held her breath. She had seen enough violence in the mining camps to know how quickly these situations could turn deadly. She owes me, Cyrus said again, but the conviction was gone from his voice. I paid good money and she just smiled and took it, and she did not owe you a damn thing beyond the work you paid for, Vincent said, and there was steel in his voice now. Not a smile, not a kind word, and sure as hell not anything else. You paid for mending. That is what she gave you. Now put the gun down before I lose my patience. Sarah watched as Vincent's hand moved almost casually to rest on the knife at his belt. It was not a threat, exactly, but the implication was clear. This was a man who knew how to handle himself, who had survived in country that killed weaker men, and who would not hesitate to do what needed doing. Cyrus must have seen it too, because his shoulders slumped and the gun lowered. This is not over, he muttered, but he was already backing away. Yes, it is, Vincent said firmly. You go near her again, you even look at her wrong, and I will hear about it. And then I will come back down from my mountain and we will have a different kind of conversation. You understand me? Cyrus did not answer, just turned and stumbled away down the street, disappearing into one of the saloons. The watching eyes behind curtains began to vanish as the entertainment ended, leaving Sarah standing in the shadow of the general store and Vincent Rourke in the middle of the dusty street. He turned to look at her then, and Sarah felt her cheeks warm under his gaze. Up close, he was even more imposing, but there was something in his eyes that was not harsh or demanding. There was concern there, and a gentleness that seemed at odds with his rough appearance. You hurt, miss? He asked, his voice much softer now. No, Sarah managed, finding her voice. No, I am fine, thank you. I do not know what would have happened if you had not come along when you did. You would have figured something out, Vincent said, and she was surprised to hear what sounded like respect in his tone. You were holding yourself together pretty well. I was terrified, Sarah admitted. Being terrified and holding yourself together are not mutually exclusive, Vincent said. He glanced down the street where Cyrus had disappeared. That man going to be a problem? I honestly do not know, Sarah said. He has never been like this before. He would come in with mending and I would do the work and he would pay and leave. I thought that was all there was to it. Men like that, they build up stories in their heads, Vincent said, his jaw tightening. Convince themselves that common courtesy means something more. It is not your fault. You did not lead him on or give him false hope. He just decided he was owed something that was never on offer. The way he said it, so matter of fact and firm, made something warm bloom in Sarah's chest. She had spent the last 3 months navigating the complicated social rules of the mining town, trying to be friendly enough to keep her business but distant enough to discourage unwanted attention. It was exhausting, and sometimes she wondered if she was doing something wrong, sending mixed signals despite her best efforts. Thank you, she said quietly, for understanding that, and for helping me. Vincent nodded, then seemed to hesitate as if he wanted to say something else but was not sure how. Finally, he cleared his throat. "You live around here." "I have a room above the seamstress shop," Sarah said, pointing down the street. "I work there. I do mending and make clothes and such." "You living alone?" The question could have sounded intrusive or threatening, but somehow it did not. It sounded like genuine concern from a man trying to assess whether she would be safe. "Yes," Sarah said. "My father died 3 months ago in a mining accident. I came here with him, so when he passed, I stayed and opened my business. I can take care of myself." "I do not doubt that," Vincent said. "But a man with whiskey in him and wounded pride can be unpredictable. You know how to shoot." Sarah shook her head. Her father had never taught her, said there was no need for a proper lady to know such things. Vincent frowned, clearly not pleased by this answer. "You got any way to lock your door, make it secure?" "Just a basic lock," Sarah admitted. "That will not stop someone determined." Vincent seemed to be thinking, his brow furrowed. Finally, he said, "I do not mean to be forward, miss, but I would feel better if I knew you were going to be safe tonight. Would you mind if I slept in my bedroll outside your door, just for tonight, until I am sure that fool has settled down?" Sarah's first instinct was to refuse. It would not look proper, having a strange man camping outside her room. But then she remembered the look in Cyrus's eyes, the rage and entitlement, and she thought about lying awake all night listening for footsteps on the stairs. "I would appreciate that," she said, "but I do not want to impose on your time. You said you came to town for supplies." "Already got most of what I need," Vincent said. "Rest can wait until morning. Besides, I was planning on camping somewhere anyway. Might as well be somewhere useful." He said it casually, like it was no imposition at all, but Sarah could see the determination in his eyes. This was a man who had decided she needed protecting, and he would see it through. "Can I at least offer you dinner?" Sarah asked. "It is the least I can do after you helped me." Vincent looked surprised, like he had not expected any kind of compensation. "You do not owe me anything either," he said carefully. "I did not help you because I expected payment." "I know," Sarah said, "but I would like to. I have stew that I made this morning, and there is more than enough for 2, unless you have somewhere else you need to be." "No," Vincent said slowly. "No, I do not have anywhere else to be." Sarah smiled, feeling some of the tension drain from her shoulders. "Then come on. The shop is just down here." She led the way down the dusty street, very aware of Vincent following behind her, leading his horse. She could feel eyes watching from windows and doorways, could imagine the gossip that would be flying through town by morning. But for once, she did not care. This man had stood up for her when no one else would, had made it clear that she did not owe anything to anyone just for being polite and doing her job. That was worth risking a bit of reputation. The seamstress shop was small but tidy, with a main room full of fabric bolts and a sewing machine that Sarah had scrimped and saved to buy, and a narrow staircase in the back that led to her living quarters. Sarah unlocked the front door and gestured Vincent inside. "You can tie your horse out back," she said. "There is a water trough and I can bring out some oats if you have them." "That would be appreciated," Vincent said. He disappeared around the side of the building, and Sarah took the opportunity to run upstairs and check her appearance in the small mirror on her wall. She looked exactly as rattled as she felt. Her dark blonde hair was falling out of its pins, and her face was pale. She quickly fixed her hair and pinched her cheeks to bring some color back, then felt foolish for doing so. This was not a social call. The man was just being kind, making sure she was safe. There was no reason to primp. Still, she smoothed down her dress and made sure everything was in order before heading back downstairs. She found Vincent in the workroom, looking at the various projects she had in progress. His large hands were clasped behind his back, as if he was afraid to touch anything. "You do good work," he said when he noticed her. "These stitches are tiny and even. Takes skill to do that." "Thank you," Sarah said, pleased by the compliment. "My mother taught me before she passed. She always said if you were going to do something, you should do it right. Smart woman." "She was," Sarah agreed. "Come on, the kitchen is upstairs." Vincent followed her up the narrow staircase, and Sarah was suddenly very aware of how small her living space was. What had seemed cozy and sufficient when she was alone now felt cramped with Vincent's large presence filling the room. He seemed to take up all the available space, though he moved carefully, as if aware he might accidentally knock something over. "Sit," Sarah said, gesturing to one of the two chairs at her small table. "I will warm up the stew." She busied herself at the stove, grateful for something to do with her hands. She could feel Vincent watching her, though not in the uncomfortable way Cyrus had watched her. This felt different, curious rather than possessive. "You said you trap in the mountains?" Sarah asked, stirring the stew to give herself something to focus on besides the way her heart was beating faster than normal. "Yes," Vincent said. "Up in the high country north of here. Beaver mostly, some mink and fox. I bring the furs down to trade a few times a year, stock up on supplies, then head back up." "That sounds lonely," Sarah said before she could stop herself. "It can be," Vincent admitted, "but I like the quiet, and the mountains, they are beautiful in a way that towns are not. Everything is clean up there, simple." "You have a cabin, of sorts," Vincent said. "Nothing fancy, but it keeps out the weather. I built it myself about 5 years back." Sarah ladled stew into 2 bowls and brought them to the table, along with some bread she had baked that morning. Vincent waited until she sat down before picking up his spoon, a gesture of courtesy that surprised her given his rough appearance. "This is good," Vincent said after the first bite. "Really good. Been a long time since I had a home-cooked meal. You do not cook for yourself?" "I cook," Vincent said with what might have been a small smile beneath his beard. "But there is a difference between cooking to stay alive and cooking to actually enjoy. This is the second kind." They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes. Sarah found herself studying Vincent's face, trying to reconcile the gentle manner with the obvious strength and capability. His hands were scarred and calloused, the hands of someone who worked hard and faced danger regularly, but they held the spoon with surprising delicacy. "Can I ask you something?" Sarah said finally. "Sure. Why did you help me? You do not know me, this is not your town, you could have just kept riding." Vincent was quiet for a moment, considering the question. "My mother," he said finally. "She was a widow trying to raise me on her own. And there were men who thought that meant she was available, that she owed them something just for existing. I watched her struggle with that my whole childhood, watched her have to fight for basic respect. When I saw that man threatening you, I heard my mother's voice in my head and I knew I could not just ride past." "Where is your mother now?" Sarah asked gently. "Died about 6 years ago," Vincent said. "Winter fever. That was when I decided to head into the mountains. Did not see much point in staying in civilization after she was gone." "I am sorry," Sarah said, and meant it. She understood that particular kind of loss, the way it hollowed you out and left you trying to figure out who you were without that person. "It was a while ago now," Vincent said. "But I think about her a lot. She was tough, had to be, but she was also kind, always helping people even when she had nothing to give. I try to live up to that." "I think you are doing a good job," Sarah said softly. Vincent looked at her then, really looked at her, and Sarah felt heat rise in her cheeks. There was something in his eyes, a warmth that made her stomach flip in a way that was not entirely unpleasant. "Tell me about your father," Vincent said, and Sarah was grateful for the change of subject. She told him about her father, about how he had dreamed of striking it rich in the Montana mines, about how he had been so excited when he found a promising claim. She told him about the cave-in, about how they had brought his body back wrapped in canvas, about the sudden realization that she was completely alone in the world. "So you decided to stay?" Vincent asked. "I did not have anywhere else to go," Sarah said honestly. "My mother's family disowned her when she married my father, said he was beneath her. His family was already gone. I had the skills to support myself, and I had already paid 2 months' rent on this place, so I figured I might as well try to make a go of it." "That is brave," Vincent said. "Most women would have found a man to marry or gone to work in one of the saloons." "I considered both options," Sarah admitted. "But I did not want to marry someone just for security, and I knew working in the saloons would mean dealing with men like Cyrus every night. This seemed like the better choice. Until today." "Until today," Sarah agreed. "But even now I do not regret it. I like the work. I like being independent. I just wish men would understand that I am running a business, not looking for a husband." "Some men do not see the difference," Vincent said. "They see a woman alone and think she must be desperate, or they think she is playing hard to get. They cannot imagine that she might actually want to be independent." "You understand it," Sarah pointed out. "I have spent 5 years living alone on a mountain," Vincent said dryly. "I understand the appeal of independence pretty well." Sarah laughed and was surprised by how good it felt. She had not really laughed, since before her father died. The sound filled her small kitchen and seemed to soften something in Vincent's expression. They finished eating and Sarah cleared the dishes, declining Vincent's offer to help. When she turned back from the wash basin, she found him standing near the window, looking out at the darkening street. "I should set up my bedroll," he said. "Make sure Porter sees me out there if he comes around." "You really think he will?" "I do not know," Vincent said honestly. "But I would rather be prepared. Men with hurt pride do foolish things." Sarah nodded, wrapping her arms around herself. The momentary lightness from dinner had faded, replaced by the reality of the situation. She was being protected by a stranger because another man thought she owed him something she had never agreed to give. "Hey," Vincent said softly, and she looked up to find him watching her with those storm cloud eyes. "You are going to be fine. I will be right outside your door, and tomorrow we will figure out a longer-term solution." "What kind of solution?" "I am not sure yet," Vincent admitted. "But I am not leaving you here unprotected. We will come up with something." The certainty in his voice was comforting. Sarah nodded, feeling some of the tension ease from her shoulders. "Thank you, Vincent. Just doing what is right," he said. Then he headed for the door, pausing at the threshold. "Lock this behind me, and if you hear anything that worries you, anything at all, you call out. I will hear you." "I will," Sarah promised. She locked the door after he left and stood there for a moment, listening to the sound of him moving around outside, setting up his camp. Then she prepared for bed, changing into her nightgown and brushing out her hair. Through the thin walls, she could hear the occasional small sound that reassured her Vincent was still there. She lay in her narrow bed, staring at the ceiling, and thought about the strange turn her day had taken. This morning, she had been a seamstress dealing with an uncomfortable customer. Tonight she was lying in bed knowing that a mountain man was camped outside her door, protecting her from that same customer who had revealed himself to be dangerous. And the strangest part was how safe she felt. Vincent Rourke was essentially a stranger, someone she had met only hours ago. By all logic, she should be just as frightened of him as she was of Cyrus Porter. But somehow, she was not. There was something solid and trustworthy about him, something that made her feel like he would do exactly what he said he would do. Sarah pulled her blankets up to her chin and listened to the sounds of the night. Somewhere in the distance, a piano played in one of the saloons. Closer, she could hear the soft sounds of Vincent's breathing, steady and reassuring. And for the first time in 3 months, she fell asleep feeling like someone was watching over her. She woke to the sound of raised voices and sat bolt upright in bed, her heart hammering. Dawn light was filtering through her window, which meant she had slept later than usual. The voices were coming from right outside her door. "I told you to stay away from her," Vincent's voice, hard and unyielding. "This is a public street. I can walk where I please." Cyrus, slurring but defiant. Sarah scrambled out of bed and threw a shawl over her nightgown, then pressed her ear to the door. "You are not walking," Vincent said. "You are lurking, and I told you what would happen if you came near her again. You do not own her. You do not have any right to tell me what to do." "I have the right that comes from being bigger, meaner, and more sober than you," Vincent said. "Now you have a choice. You can turn around and walk away, or I can help you walk away. But I should tell you, my way of helping involves you being a lot less comfortable. You cannot just—" There was a sound of movement, a yelp from Cyrus, and then his voice came from further away. "Fine, fine, I am going. And you do not come back," Vincent called after him. "This is your last warning, Porter. Next time I will not be so gentle." Sarah waited until she heard Cyrus's footsteps retreating down the street before she unlocked her door and opened it. Vincent was standing at the top of the stairs, his hair mussed from sleep and his shirt unbuttoned at the collar. His bedroll was neatly packed and set to one side. "You all right?" he asked when he saw her. "I am fine," Sarah said. "I heard voices and got worried. What did you do to him?" "Just helped him remember which direction to walk," Vincent said. "Nothing permanent, but he got the message." "Thank you," Sarah said. "Again, I seem to be saying that a lot." "No need for thanks," Vincent said. He hesitated, then added, "I have been thinking about your situation, about what happens after I leave." "So have I," Sarah admitted. "I do not think Cyrus is going to give up just because you scared him once." "Neither do I," Vincent said grimly. "Men like that, they do not learn easy, which is why I have a proposal for you." "What kind of proposal?" "Come with me," Vincent said. "Up to my cabin in the mountains. You can stay there for a while, let things cool down here. Then when it is safe, you can come back." Sarah stared at him. "You are inviting me to stay with you, in your cabin, alone." "I know how it sounds," Vincent said quickly, "but I am not suggesting anything improper. The cabin has 2 rooms, you would have privacy, and up there no one can bother you, you would be safe." "I have my business here," Sarah said slowly, "my customers." "Will your customers matter if you are hurt or worse?" Vincent asked bluntly. "Sarah, I have seen men like Porter before. He is not going to let this go, and you do not have anyone here to protect you." "I cannot just leave everything I have built," Sarah said, even as part of her was tempted by the offer. The idea of being somewhere safe, somewhere away from Cyrus and his entitled rage, was intensely appealing. "You would not be leaving forever," Vincent said. "Just for a while. And you could bring your sewing things with you. I am sure there are plenty of things that need mending up there." Sarah looked at him, trying to read his intentions, but his face was open, honest. He genuinely seemed to be offering sanctuary with no strings attached. "Why would you do this?" she asked. "You do not even know me." "I know enough," Vincent said. "I know you are brave and independent and trying to make your own way in the world. I know you do not deserve to be terrorized by some fool who cannot take no for an answer. And I know I have the means to help you, so I should." It was the kind of simple, straightforward logic that Sarah was coming to realize was typical of Vincent Rourke. He saw a problem, he saw a solution, and he acted on it without overthinking or expecting anything in return. "Let me think about it," Sarah said. "Can you give me a day?" Of course, Vincent said. I need to finish getting my supplies anyway, and I will stay close today, make sure Porter does not try anything. You do not have to, I know I do not have to, Vincent interrupted gently. I want to. Now you should probably get dressed. And maybe keep your door locked today while you work, just in case. Sarah nodded and retreated back into her room. She dressed quickly, her mind spinning. The smart thing to do would be to refuse Vincent's offer. Going off to a mountain cabin with a strange man was the kind of thing that ruined reputations permanently. But then again, her reputation here was probably already damaged just from having him camp outside her door last night. And what was the alternative? Stay here and hope Cyrus lost interest. Hope he did not come back drunk some night and break down her door. Hope someone else would step in to help if things got worse. Sarah looked around her small room at the life she had built here. It was not much, but it was hers. The thought of abandoning it made her chest ache. But the thought of staying and living in fear made her feel sick. She finished dressing and went downstairs to open the shop. Through the window, she could see Vincent across the street, leaning against a post outside the general store. He was not watching her shop directly, but she got the sense he could see her door from where he stood. True to his word, he was staying close. The morning passed slowly. A few customers came in, but Sarah could tell they were there more for gossip than for actual business. News of yesterday's confrontation had spread, as she knew it would. The women of the town looked at her with a mixture of curiosity and disapproval, clearly wondering what she had done to attract such drama. I heard that mountain man spent the night outside your door, Mrs. Henderson said, her voice dripping with false concern. I do hope you were not compromised, dear. Mr. Rourke was kind enough to ensure my safety after Mr. Porter threatened me with a gun, Sarah said, keeping her voice level. I am very grateful for his assistance. Oh, of course, Mrs. Henderson said, though her tone suggested she did not believe for a moment that Vincent's motives were pure. Still, you must be careful about appearances. People talk. Let them talk, Sarah said, surprising herself with the steel in her voice. I would rather be alive with a questionable reputation than dead with a pristine one. Mrs. Henderson looked scandalized and left shortly after without buying anything. Sarah watched her go and felt something settle in her chest. She was tired of worrying about what other people thought. Tired of moderating her behavior to meet their expectations. Where had that gotten her? She had been nothing but proper and professional, and Cyrus Porter had still decided she owed him something. At noon, Vincent appeared at her door with a basket of food from the boarding house. Thought you might not want to go out, he said. Brought you lunch. You did not have to do that, Sarah said, but she was touched by the gesture. I was getting some for myself anyway, Vincent said. Figured I might as well get extra. They ate together in the workroom, Vincent sitting on a stool that looked comically small beneath his large frame. He told her about the mountains, about the wildlife and the weather, and the way the aspens turned gold in the fall. He made it sound beautiful and peaceful, a world away from the dusty, complicated life of the mining town. Have you decided, he asked finally, about my offer? Sarah set down her fork and looked at him. His face was patient, unconcerned, as if her answer would not matter either way. But she could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands were clasped a little too tightly together. If I come with you, she said slowly, what would the arrangement be? How long would I stay? As long as you need to, Vincent said. Could be a few weeks, could be a few months. However long it takes for Porter to lose interest or for the situation here to change. And you would expect nothing from me, no payment, no obligations. I would expect you to respect my home and not waste food or supplies, Vincent said. Beyond that, no, I am not Cyrus Porter, Sarah. I am not going to demand anything from you just because I helped you." "I know that," Sarah said, and realized she meant it. "I can tell you are not like him. You have made that very clear. So you will come." Sarah took a deep breath. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will come with you. But I want to bring my sewing machine and as much fabric as I can carry. If I am going to be gone for a while, I need to be able to work." Vincent's face broke into a smile, the first real smile she had seen from him, and it transformed his entire appearance. He went from intimidating to warm in an instant, and Sarah felt her heart do an unexpected flip. "We will bring whatever you need," Vincent said. "I have pack horses. We can load them up. When do you want to leave?" "As soon as possible," Sarah said. The decision made, she felt a weight lift from her shoulders. "Tomorrow morning." "Tomorrow morning it is," Vincent agreed. "I will help you pack tonight." They spent the rest of the afternoon organizing Sarah's belongings. She was surprised by how little she had accumulated in 3 months. Her clothes fit in one trunk, her sewing supplies in another. The sewing machine was carefully wrapped in blankets. Everything else was either part of the shop itself or not worth bringing. As evening fell, Vincent went to arrange for pack horses while Sarah made a final sweep of her room. She was in the process of writing a note for the landlord, explaining that she would be away for a while but still paying rent, when she heard footsteps on the stairs. Heavy, unsteady footsteps that were horribly familiar. Sarah's blood went cold. She had locked the front door, she was sure of it. But the footsteps were coming up the stairs, which meant someone had gotten inside. "Sarah," Cyrus's voice, thick and slurred. "I know you are up there. Time we had a talk." Sarah looked around frantically for a weapon. Her eyes landed on the heavy iron pan she used for cooking. She grabbed it and positioned herself behind the door, her heart pounding so hard she thought she might be sick. "Sarah, do not make this difficult," Cyrus said. He was at the top of the stairs now, right outside her door. "You need to understand how things work in this town. A woman alone, she needs protection, and protection has a price." "Get out of my home," Sarah called, trying to sound braver than she felt. "I will scream. People will come." "No one is going to come," Cyrus said, and Sarah could hear the sneer in his voice. "They all think you are a whore anyway, letting that mountain man camp outside your door, so scream all you want. No one cares." The door handle rattled. Sarah tightened her grip on the pan, preparing herself. The lock would hold for a moment, but Cyrus was a miner, strong from hauling rocks and swinging a pickaxe. If he wanted through that door, he would get through it. The door shuddered as Cyrus threw his weight against it. Once, twice. The wood began to splinter. Sarah opened her mouth to scream, but before she could, there was a tremendous crash from below. The sound of the front door being kicked in, followed by heavy footsteps taking the stairs 2 at a time. "Porter," Vincent's voice, a roar of pure fury. The pressure on Sarah's door immediately ceased. She heard scuffling, a shout, and then a series of thuds as something large tumbled down the stairs. Sarah dropped the pan and yanked open her door to find Vincent standing at the top of the stairs, breathing hard, his hands clenched into fists. "Did he touch you?" Vincent asked, his eyes wild. "Did he hurt you?" "No," Sarah managed. "No, you got here in time. How did you know?" "Saw him heading this way." "Looked wrong," Vincent said. He took a deep breath, visibly trying to calm himself. "He is downstairs, unconscious but breathing. We need to get the law involved now. This has gone too far." "The law is 50 miles away," Sarah reminded him. "Then we make our own law," Vincent said grimly. He headed back down the stairs and Sarah followed, her legs shaking. Cyrus was lying at the bottom of the stairs, groaning. His nose was bleeding and he had the beginnings of what would be a spectacular black eye. Vincent grabbed him by the collar and hauled him to his feet with one hand. "You listen to me very carefully," Vincent said, his voice low and dangerous. "You are going to leave town, tonight. You are going to pack your things and get on a horse and ride away, and you are never going to come back. Because if I ever see you near Sarah again, if I ever even hear that you have been near her, I will not be this gentle. Do you understand me?" "You cannot make me leave," Cyrus mumbled through his bloody nose. "I have a claim here. I have a right." "You have no rights," Vincent said. "You gave those up when you decided to force your way into a woman's home. Now you are lucky I do not drag you to the marshal myself and have you charged with attempted assault. But I am giving you a choice. Leave on your own or I make you leave. But either way you are going." He released Cyrus, who stumbled back against the wall. Sarah could see the calculation in Cyrus's eyes, the weighing of his options. Then his shoulders slumped in defeat. "Fine," he muttered. "Fine, I will go." "Now," Vincent said. "You go now. We will watch to make sure you pack and leave." It took Cyrus less than an hour to gather his belongings and load them onto his horse. Vincent stood in the street the entire time, arms crossed, a silent and imposing presence. When Cyrus finally rode out of town, Vincent watched until he was completely out of sight. "He might come back," Sarah said quietly, standing beside Vincent in the dusty street. "He might," Vincent agreed. "But by then you will be gone and he will not know where to find you. And I will make sure word gets around that if anyone tells him where you went, they will answer to me." Sarah looked up at him, this man who had appeared in her life less than 24 hours ago and had already changed everything. "Why are you doing all this?" she asked. "Really?" Vincent was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he said, "Because everyone deserves to feel safe. Because women should not have to live in fear just for existing. Because it is the right thing to do." He paused, then added more softly, "And because from the moment I saw you standing up to that fool despite being terrified, I thought you were one of the bravest people I had ever met. And brave people deserve to be protected." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. She had been so strong for so long, holding herself together through her father's death and the struggle to establish her business and the constant low-level fear that came with being a woman alone. But Vincent's words, the simple acknowledgement of what she had been carrying, broke something loose inside her. "Thank you," she whispered. Vincent reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, and gently wiped a tear from her cheek with his thumb. His hand was rough and calloused, but the touch was infinitely gentle. "You do not have to thank me," he said. "Not for doing what any decent man should do." They stood there in the street as the sun set, and Sarah felt something shift between them. This was no longer just about protection or helping a stranger. There was something more here, something that made her pulse quicken and her breath catch. But Vincent stepped back, breaking the moment, his expression carefully neutral. "We should finish packing," he said. "Get an early start tomorrow." "Yes," Sarah agreed, though part of her wanted to say something else to acknowledge what had just passed between them. But she was not sure what to say, was not even sure what she was feeling. So she just nodded and followed him back inside. They finished packing in companionable silence, working together to wrap and secure Sarah's belongings. When everything was ready, Vincent made his bed outside her door once more, just in case. "Tomorrow you will not have to sleep outside my door," Sarah said. "You will be able to sleep in your own bed. Tomorrow you will be somewhere safe," Vincent said. "That is what matters." Sarah slept better that night than she had any right to, considering the day's events. Knowing that Vincent was outside, that Cyrus was gone, that tomorrow she would be leaving for somewhere new, gave her a sense of peace she had not felt in months. They left at dawn. Sarah's belongings loaded onto 2 pack horses Vincent had acquired. Sarah took one last look at the seamstress shop, at the life she was leaving behind, and felt surprisingly little regret. She had built this place out of necessity, not love. Maybe up in the mountains, she could figure out what she actually wanted instead of just what she needed to survive. The ride out of Hawthorne was quiet. A few early risers watched them go, and Sarah could only imagine what stories would circulate about her departure. But she found she did not care. Let them talk. She was going somewhere safe, with someone who had proven he would protect her without demanding anything in return. The trail into the mountains was steep and narrow, winding through dense forest that gradually gave way to rocky slopes and high meadows. Vincent led the way, navigating the path with easy familiarity while Sarah followed, taking in the beauty around her. He had been right about the mountains. There was something clean and simple about them, a wildness that was intimidating but also strangely comforting. How much further? Sarah asked after several hours of riding. Another few hours, Vincent said. We will get there before dark. They stopped at midday beside a stream, letting the horses drink and rest. Sarah dismounted, her legs shaky from the long ride, and Vincent was immediately there, steadying her with a hand on her elbow. "You all right? Not used to riding this long?" "I am fine," Sarah said. "Just need to stretch a bit." They ate a simple meal of bread and dried meat, sitting on rocks beside the stream. The water was crystal clear, rushing over smooth stones, and the only sounds were natural ones: birds, wind, the babble of water. No shouting, no gunshots, no threats, just peace. "It is beautiful up here," Sarah said. "It is," Vincent agreed. "That is why I stay. Down in the towns, everything is complicated, people always wanting something, always judging. Up here it is just you and the land. Simple." "You ever get lonely?" Vincent considered the question. "Sometimes," he admitted. "Especially in winter when the snow is deep and you cannot go anywhere for months at a time, but mostly I prefer it. People make things harder than they need to be." "Not all people," Sarah said softly. Vincent looked at her, something warm in his eyes. "No," he agreed. "Not all people." They continued on, climbing higher into the mountains. The air grew thinner and cooler, and Sarah pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders. Just when she was beginning to wonder if they would ever arrive, Vincent pointed ahead. "There," he said. "Home." Sarah looked and saw a cabin nestled in a small clearing, backed by towering pines. It was larger than she expected, solidly built from logs, with a stone chimney and real glass windows. A small barn stood to one side, and there was a vegetable garden that looked well tended despite being late in the season. "You built all this yourself?" Sarah asked, amazed. "Over several years," Vincent said. "Started with just one room, added on as I went." "It is not fancy, but it is sturdy and warm." As they drew closer, Sarah could see the care that had gone into the construction. The logs were carefully fitted, the roof properly shingled, the door hung straight. This was not the rough shack she had been imagining. This was a real home. Vincent dismounted and came to help Sarah down. His hands spanned her waist easily as he lifted her from the saddle. And for a moment they stood very close, his hands still on her waist, her hands on his shoulders. Sarah looked up into his face and saw something there that made her breath catch a wanting, quickly hidden but unmistakable. Then Vincent stepped back and turned to unload the horses, and the moment passed. The cabin's interior was just as impressive as the exterior. The main room held a large stone fireplace, a table with chairs, a comfortable-looking armchair, and shelves full of books. A doorway led to what appeared to be a bedroom, and Vincent gestured to it. "That is yours," he said. "I will sleep out here by the fire." "Vincent, I cannot take your bed," Sarah protested. "This is your home." "And you are my guest," Vincent said firmly. "The bedroom is yours. I have slept by that fire more times than I can count. I will be perfectly comfortable." Sarah wanted to argue but could see from his expression that it would be pointless. This was a man who had decided something, and once he decided, that was that. "Thank you," she said instead. "For everything. For bringing me here, for keeping me safe, for—" "You do not have to keep thanking me," Vincent interrupted gently. "Just being here is thanks enough." Sarah wanted to ask what he meant by that, but Vincent was already heading back outside to finish unloading the horses. She took the opportunity to explore the bedroom, which held a simple but well-made bed, a dresser, and a trunk. The window looked out over the valley, and the view was breathtaking. This was going to be her home for the next few weeks or months. Alone in the mountains with a man she barely knew but somehow trusted completely. It should have terrified her. Instead, she felt excited, like she was standing on the edge of something new and unknown but full of possibility. The days settled into a comfortable routine. Vincent would wake early and tend to his trap lines while Sarah organized the cabin and began sewing projects she had brought with her. He taught her to fish in the stream that ran near the cabin, showed her which plants were edible and which to avoid. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire and talk, sharing stories of their lives before this. Sarah learned that Vincent had been raised in Missouri, that his father had died when he was young, leaving his mother to raise him alone. She learned that he was 30 years old, just 6 years older than herself, though his weathered appearance made him seem older. She learned that he loved to read, and that the books on his shelves were treasured possessions he had collected over years. Vincent learned that Sarah had always wanted to travel, to see the world beyond her small hometown. He learned that she loved thunderstorms and hated the color yellow for no reason she could explain. He learned that she sang while she sewed, usually hymns her mother had taught her, and that her voice was lovely and clear. What Sarah did not tell him was how her feelings were changing, how her heart would speed up when he came back from checking his traps, how she found herself watching him when he did not notice, admiring the way his muscles moved under his shirt when he chopped wood or hauled water. How she had started imagining what it would be like if this arrangement was permanent, if this was not just temporary sanctuary but real life. She told herself it was just gratitude, just the natural result of spending so much time with someone who had been kind to her. But deep down, she knew it was more than that. She was falling in love with Vincent Rourke, and she had no idea what to do about it. Vincent, for his part, was having similar thoughts. He found himself looking forward to coming back to the cabin each day, knowing Sarah would be there. He loved the way she had made the space feel like a real home, adding small touches that he never would have thought of: wildflowers in a jar on the table, his books organized by subject, curtains she had sewn for the windows. He loved watching her work, the way her face became focused and calm when she was sewing. He loved her laugh, which she gave freely up here in the mountains where she did not have to guard herself. He loved the way she was not afraid to try new things, whether it was learning to fish or helping him tan a hide or climbing to a high ridge just to see the view. But he kept these feelings locked tightly inside. Sarah was here because she needed protection, not because she wanted to be courted by a mountain man. She had her own life waiting for her back in Hawthorne, her own business and dreams. He would not take advantage of their situation by declaring feelings she might feel obligated to return out of gratitude, so they danced around each other, both aware of the growing tension but neither willing to address it. One evening, about 3 weeks into Sarah's stay, a storm rolled in. They could see it coming from miles away, dark clouds piling up over the peaks, and Vincent hurried to secure everything outside while Sarah made sure the windows were shuttered tight. The storm hit with fury, rain pounding on the roof and wind howling through the trees. Sarah stood at the window watching the lightning illuminate the valley, her eyes wide with delight rather than fear. "I told you I loved storms," she said when Vincent came to stand beside her. "You are not afraid?" "No," Sarah said. "I think they are beautiful. All that power and energy, completely wild and uncontrolled. It reminds you how small we are, but also how strong. We build these shelters and we survive." "You are quite the philosopher," Vincent said, but he was smiling. "My mother used to say that storms were God's way of washing the world clean," Sarah said, "getting rid of all the dust and ugliness so things could start fresh." They stood together watching the storm rage, and Sarah became very aware of Vincent's presence beside her. He was so close she could feel the heat radiating from his body, could smell the scent of wood smoke and leather that always clung to him. She wanted to lean into him, to feel his arm around her shoulders, to turn her face up for the kiss she thought about far too often. But she did not. Because what if she was wrong? What if he did not feel the same way? What if she ruined this perfect, comfortable friendship they had built? The storm passed after a few hours, leaving the world fresh and clean just as Sarah's mother had promised. Vincent went to check that the barn and animals had weathered it safely while Sarah prepared dinner. When he came back, there was something different in his eyes, a sort of determination that had not been there before. "Sarah," he said, "I need to talk to you about something." Sarah's heart began to pound. "All right." Vincent ran a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture she had never seen from him before. "You have been here almost a month now, and I have been thinking that maybe it is time we talked about what happens next." "What do you mean?" Sarah asked, though she was afraid she knew. "I mean you cannot stay here forever," Vincent said. "Eventually you will need to go back to town, back to your business and your life, and I have been thinking maybe it is time to start planning for that." Sarah felt something sink in her chest. "Oh," she said, "you want me to leave?" "No," Vincent said quickly. "That is not I do not want you to leave, but I thought you would want to. I thought you would want to get back to your life." "My life," Sarah repeated. "You mean my business in a town where I have no friends and men think I owe them something for basic transactions." "That is not," Vincent stopped, frustrated. "I just do not want you to feel like you have to stay here out of obligation. You are free to go whenever you want." "I know that," Sarah said. "You have made it very clear that I do not owe you anything. That has been the whole point, hasn't it? I do not owe Cyrus anything. I do not owe you anything. I am just free floating through life, owing nothing to anyone." "That came out wrong," Vincent said. "I did not mean it like that." "Then what did you mean?" Sarah asked, feeling tears sting her eyes and hating herself for it. "Because from where I am standing, it sounds like you are trying to get rid of me." "I am trying to do the right thing," Vincent said, his voice rising with frustration. "I am trying not to take advantage of you." "Take advantage of me how?" Sarah demanded. "By making you feel like you have to stay." Vincent stopped, his jaw clenched. "Sarah, I am trying very hard to be honorable here, to not make this situation more complicated than it already is." "Maybe I want it to be complicated," Sarah said, the words out before she could stop them. Vincent stared at her. "What?" "Maybe I want it to be complicated," Sarah repeated, her heart pounding. "Maybe I do not want to go back to Hawthorne. Maybe I like it here. Maybe I like being here with you." "Sarah, I love you," Sarah blurted out. "I love you, Vincent. And I know that is probably not what you want to hear, and I know I am supposed to be grateful and nothing more, but I cannot help it. I love you and I want to stay here, and I do not care if that makes things complicated." The silence that followed was deafening. Vincent just stood there staring at her, his expression unreadable. Sarah felt her cheeks burning, felt the mortification settling in. She had ruined everything. She should have kept her mouth shut, should have Vincent closed the distance between them in 2 long strides and kissed her. It was not a gentle kiss, or a tentative one. It was fierce and desperate, like he had been holding back for too long and could not contain it anymore. His hands cupped her face, and Sarah's arms went around his neck, pulling him closer, trying to communicate everything she felt in that moment. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Vincent rested his forehead against hers. "I love you too," he said, his voice rough. "God help me, Sarah. I have loved you since you stood outside that general store refusing to back down to a man with a gun. But I did not think I did not know if you thought I was just grateful," Sarah finished. "I did not want you to feel obligated to return my feelings just because I helped you," Vincent said. "I wanted you to be free to choose, to know you could walk away without owing me anything." "I do not want to walk away," Sarah said firmly. "I want to stay here with you if you will have me." "If I will have you," Vincent repeated, then laughed, a sound of pure joy. "Sarah, having you here has been the best month of my life. I would be honored if you would stay." "Then I am staying," Sarah said, "permanently." "Unless you think that is too fast or too," Vincent kissed her again, cutting off her words. When he pulled back, he was smiling, the first full, unguarded smile she had seen from him. "Not too fast," he said. "Not nearly fast enough, in my opinion." They stood there in the firelight, holding each other, and Sarah felt like something that had been wound tight inside her finally relaxed. This was what she wanted. Not the seamstress shop, not the respectability of living alone and making her own way. Just this. Just Vincent and the mountains and the simple, honest life they could build together. "We should probably talk about practical matters," Vincent said eventually, though he made no move to let her go. "Like the fact that we should probably get married if you are going to stay here." "Is that a proposal?" Sarah asked, amused. "I suppose it is a very unromantic one," Vincent admitted. "Let me try again." He stepped back and, to Sarah's surprise and delight, dropped to one knee. "Sarah Emerson, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? I cannot promise you an easy life or a fancy home, but I can promise you that I will love you and protect you and wake up grateful every single day that you chose to stay with me." "Yes," Sarah said, pulling him back to his feet. "Yes, of course, yes." They were married 4 weeks later by a traveling preacher who came through the mountains. It was a simple ceremony with no guests beyond the preacher himself, and a trapper who lived 20 miles away and considered himself Vincent's closest neighbor. Sarah wore a dress she had sewn herself from fabric she had brought from Hawthorne, and Vincent wore his cleanest clothes and looked terrified and happy in equal measure. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Vincent kissed her with such tenderness that Sarah felt tears slide down her cheeks. This was what love was supposed to be. Not obligation or debt or complicated social rules. Just two people choosing each other freely and completely. They spent their wedding night in the cabin that was now officially their home, and Sarah felt no fear or nervousness. This was Vincent, the man who had protected her without demanding anything in return, who had given her space to choose him rather than forcing her hand. She trusted him completely. Their life together fell into a comfortable rhythm. Sarah continued her sewing, now making clothes for Vincent and herself rather than for customers. Vincent taught her more about surviving in the mountains, about reading weather and tracking animals and 100 other skills she never would have learned in town. They talked and laughed and built a life that was simple but rich. Winter came, bringing heavy snows that made the cabin feel like its own small world cut off from everything else. Sarah had worried she might feel trapped or isolated, but instead she felt cozy and safe. Vincent had been right about the winter being hard, but it was also beautiful. The world became a pristine white wonderland, and their evenings by the fire felt sacred somehow, a gift of time and togetherness that the outside world could not intrude upon. One night in January, as they sat by the fire, Sarah told Vincent she thought she might be pregnant. "Are you sure?" Vincent asked, his eyes wide. "Not completely," Sarah admitted, "but I am fairly certain. Are you happy about it?" "Happy," Vincent pulled her into his arms. "Sarah, I am thrilled, terrified but thrilled." "Why terrified?" "Because I do not know anything about being a father," Vincent admitted. "What if I do it wrong?" "You will be wonderful," Sarah said firmly. "Look how you took care of me. You will take care of our child the same way." "That is different," Vincent protested. "You were a grown woman who could take care of herself." "A baby is a baby that will be lucky to have you as a father," Sarah interrupted. "I am not worried, Vincent, not even a little bit." Their son was born in late summer, delivered with the help of a midwife from the nearest settlement, who Vincent had hired to stay with them for the last month of Sarah's pregnancy. The labor was long and difficult, and Vincent paced outside the cabin like a caged animal, unable to help or even be present. When the midwife finally called him in and placed the baby in his arms, Vincent stared down at the tiny, red-faced infant with an expression of complete wonder. "He is perfect," Vincent whispered. "Sarah, he is absolutely perfect." They named him Thomas after Vincent's father, and he became the center of their world. Vincent was, as Sarah had predicted, a wonderful father. Patient and gentle, always ready to rock the baby or change him or walk him around the cabin when he was fussy. Sarah watched him with their son and fell in love with him all over again. 2 years later, they had a daughter named Mary, and their small cabin rang with the sounds of children. Vincent added on another room and built bigger furniture to accommodate their growing family. Sarah sewed clothes and curtains and quilts, making their home warm and colorful. They made trips down to settlements a few times a year, Sarah and Vincent both going now that the children were older. Sarah always felt a small knot of anxiety in her stomach when they went to towns, worried that somehow Cyrus Porter would appear, that the past would catch up with her. But Vincent always stayed close, his solid presence a reminder that she was safe, that those days were behind her. On one such trip, they ran into Mrs. Henderson from Hawthorne, who was visiting her daughter in the settlement. She looked at Sarah with surprise and something that might have been disapproval. "Sarah Emerson, or I suppose it is Sarah Rourke now," she said. "I heard you had run off with that mountain man. Some people said you had come to a bad end." "As you can see, I am doing quite well," Sarah said, gesturing to Vincent and the children. "Living in the mountains like a savage," Mrs. Henderson sniffed. "Such a waste of your talents." "I do not think so," Sarah said calmly. "I am very happy." "Well, I suppose if you are satisfied," Mrs. Henderson said, clearly not believing anyone could be happy with such a life. After she walked away, Vincent looked at Sarah with concern. "Does it bother you what people like her think?" "No," Sarah said honestly. "I used to care what people thought. I used to try so hard to be respectable and proper and acceptable, but it did not protect me. Cyrus still decided I owed him something. The town still judged me. So now I just try to be happy instead. And I am Vincent. I am happier than I ever imagined I could be." Vincent pulled her close, right there in the middle of the street, and kissed her forehead. "So am I," he said. "So am I." The years passed in a blur of seasons and small moments. The children grew, Thomas becoming serious and thoughtful like his father, Mary wild and adventurous like Sarah, sometimes wished she could have been as a child. They added a third child, another boy they named James, and the cabin echoed with noise and laughter and occasional tears. Sarah never went back to Hawthorne. She heard through the occasional traveler that her seamstress shop had been taken over by someone else, that the town had continued on without her. She felt no regret about leaving. That life, those careful boundaries and constant vigilance, felt like something from another lifetime. Instead, she built a life in the mountains with Vincent. They grew old together in that cabin, their children eventually leaving to make their own lives but always coming back for visits, bringing grandchildren who filled the cabin with new energy and joy. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Vincent took Sarah on a walk to a high ridge that overlooked the entire valley. It was the same ridge he had brought her to in those first few months, when they were still dancing around their feelings for each other. "You ever regret it?" Vincent asked as they stood looking out over the mountains. "Giving up your business, your independence?" "I did not give up my independence," Sarah said. "I chose you. There is a difference. And no, I do not regret it for even a moment. This is the life I was meant to live." "I think about that day in Hawthorne sometimes," Vincent said. "How easily I could have just ridden past, how close I came to never knowing you." "But you did not ride past," Sarah said. "You stopped and you helped me and you made it clear that I did not owe anyone anything. And then you let me choose you freely without obligation or pressure. That is why I love you, Vincent, because you saw me as a person, not a possession. You gave me the freedom to choose, and I chose this. I chose you. Every single day I would choose you." Vincent pulled her into his arms, and they stood there on the ridge as the sun set over the mountains. Two people who had found each other in unlikely circumstances and built something lasting and true. Their grandchildren would eventually tell stories about them, about the mountain man who saved the seamstress and the woman who was brave enough to build a new life in the wilderness. But the real story was simpler than that. It was about respect and choice, and the understanding that love could not be owed or demanded, only freely given. And Sarah and Vincent had given it to each other completely, building a life that was rich not in material things but in love and family, and the simple joy of choosing each other every single day. When Sarah was 70 years old, she sat in the rocking chair Vincent had built for her 40th birthday and watched her great-grandchildren play in the clearing outside the cabin. The cabin itself had been expanded several times over the years, with children and grandchildren adding rooms and improvements, but the original structure that Vincent had built still stood at its heart. Vincent came out and sat beside her, moving slower now but still strong, his hair completely white but his eyes still that same striking blue-gray that had captured her attention 50 years ago. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, taking her hand. "How lucky I am," Sarah said. How one moment of terror led to a lifetime of happiness. If Cyrus Porter had not been such a fool, if you had not been riding through town that day, my whole life would have been different. "Maybe we would have found each other anyway," Vincent said. "Maybe some things are just meant to be." "Maybe," Sarah agreed. "Or maybe we just made good choices. You chose to help me even though you did not have to. I chose to trust you even though I did not know you. We both chose each other when we could have chosen safety or convention or a dozen other things." "Best choice I ever made," Vincent said, bringing her hand to his lips. "Mine too," Sarah said. They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the children play, listening to the wind in the pines, feeling the warmth of the sun on their faces. It was a simple moment, unremarkable in many ways. But it was also everything. It was the life they had built together, the family they had created, the love that had sustained them through 5 decades of joys and sorrows. And it had all started because one man had understood a simple truth, that women did not owe men anything just for being polite or doing business or existing in the world. That real love was about choice and freedom and mutual respect, not obligation or debt or possession. Vincent had given Sarah that freedom, and she had chosen him. And that choice had made all the difference. Years later, when they were both gone and their children told stories of their lives to the next generation, They always emphasized that moment. The moment when Vincent Rourke made it clear that Sarah Emerson owed no man anything, that her affection and her heart were hers to give freely or not at all. It was a lesson that echoed down through the generations, carried by daughters and granddaughters who grew up knowing their worth was not defined by men's opinions or expectations, carried by sons and grandsons who learned that true strength was not about possession but protection, not about demanding but earning. The cabin in the mountains still stood long after Sarah and Vincent were gone, maintained by their descendants as a reminder of where their family began. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the wind whispered through the pines, you could almost hear Sarah's voice singing hymns while she sewed, and Vincent's deep laugh in response, and the sound of children playing in the clearing. But more than that, you could feel the love that had built this place, the kind of love that was freely chosen and fiercely protected, the kind of love that changed not just 2 lives but countless lives that came after, all because one mountain man understood that affection could not be claimed, only offered, and one brave woman had the courage to offer her heart to a man who had proven he would never demand it. Their story became legend in those mountains, told around campfires and dinner tables, adapted and embellished until the truth was hard to separate from myth. But at its core, the story remained the same. A woman in trouble, a man who helped without expecting anything in return, and a love that grew from mutual respect and free choice. It was a simple story, really, but the best stories often are. And in a time and place where women's choices were limited, and their worth often measured by their relationships to men, it was a revolutionary one. Sarah Rourke had owed no man anything. And yet she had given everything to Vincent Rourke, freely and completely, because he had proven himself worthy of that gift, and he had treasured it, treasured her, for every day of their long and happy life together. That was the real story. That was the legacy they left behind. And it was a legacy worth remembering.